The invitation showed up on a quiet Tuesday, a heavy cream envelope embossed with gold script. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it, reading the words that would drag me back into a world I'd left behind 7 years ago. You are invited to the wedding celebration of Emma Catherine Anderson, my sister. Of course, it was her turn to have the spotlight, the flawless, dazzling event she'd always dreamed of. Emma, the golden child. And me. I was the one who never quite fit the mold, the disappointment who chose her own road instead of theirs. My name is Olivia Anderson, and at 32, I was returning to the place I once called home, not by choice but by invitation. The first one since my parents had disowned me for refusing to follow their blueprint for my life. The last memory I had of that house was my father's voice, cold with fury, calling me ungrateful. My mother's tears, theatrical and cutting, about the embarrassment I'd brought on the family. And Emma, standing silently in the corner as they told me to leave and not come back. Now I stood once again at the gates of the Anderson estate, the mansion gleaming as it always had, trimmed gardens lined with perfect roses. Beauty arranged into obedience. Just like everything my mother touched. Olivia! Her voice cut through the air like a knife. She stood at the doorway, composed and sharp. No hug, no warmth. Just that same measuring gaze. You're late. I glanced at my watch. 5 minutes early. I almost smiled. Good to see you too, Mother. She turned on her heel, the click of her heels echoing down the marble hallway. Well, this visit was your decision, wasn't it? Emma insisted you be included. Though, her eyes flicked over my outfit, you might have dressed more appropriately. I looked down at my tailored suit, elegant and understated, worth a small fortune, but clearly not the prim attire she'd always preferred. Come along, she said briskly, leading me to the kitchen where caterers moved in a flurry of motion. You'll assist with coordination, make sure the staff follows instructions. Emma's day must be flawless. It hit me then, they hadn't invited me as family. I was here to work. Kept my tone even. Of course. Whatever Emma needs. Good, she said, satisfied. Thomas comes from an excellent family. A merger between the companies is already being arranged. Course. In this house, love had always come second to leverage. That was why they'd been so furious when I refused to marry one of my father's business associates. But what they never discovered was that walking away had been the best decision of my life. The small tech startup I joined back then had evolved into one of the most successful firms in the country. Today, I own 3 companies, each worth more than my father's empire. They had no idea. I changed my name professionally, distanced myself from their world completely. To them, I was still the foolish daughter who had thrown everything away. Then came Emma, gliding down the grand staircase like she'd stepped out of a bridal magazine. At 28, she was the perfect reflection of our mother's dreams, polished, poised, and painfully perfect. Liv, she said brightly, pulling me into a practiced hug. I'm so happy you came. Everything needs to be absolutely perfect. Congratulations, I said, returning the smile. Thomas must be quite the man. Her expression flickered. He's perfect. Daddy says this marriage will secure the company's future. His family's connections are invaluable. There it was, the same script we'd been raised to follow. I thought about warning her, about telling her what it costs to live for other people's approval, but she already knew. And she'd chosen to accept it. The rehearsal dinner's tomorrow, my mother interjected. Be here early to help. And please, Olivia, try to look presentable this time. I smiled faintly. Don't worry. I'll wear something memorable. And this time when I walked into that room, they'd finally see who I'd become. 7 years after they'd thrown me out, I was driving away from that mansion again. Only this time toward my hotel instead of nowhere. As the city lights flickered through my windshield, I thought about how far I'd come. My Manhattan penthouse, my companies that bore my name, and the life I'd built entirely on my own terms. Tomorrow they'd see a glimpse of it, whether they were ready or not. The question was I ready for them to finally see the truth? The rehearsal dinner was everything I expected. Too many flowers, too much champagne, and attention thick enough to slice with a knife. I arrived early, dressed in a black Chanel gown that shimmered beneath the chandeliers. The look on my mother's face, half horror, half envy, was worth every dollar. "That outfit isn't exactly what I'd expect from the staff," she said coolly, her lips curving into that familiar disapproving smile. "I'm not staff, Mother," I said evenly. "I'm family. Remember." My father entered then, his presence still heavy enough to draw every eye in the room. "Olivia," he said curtly, "I trust you'll show some restraint tonight. We don't need awkward questions from the Harrisons about your situation." I nearly laughed. Just a month earlier, I'd sat across from Mr. Harrison himself in a Manhattan boardroom. He hadn't realized I was that Olivia, the one his son was about to marry into. To him, I was Olivia Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Tech, and he'd been the one eager to impress me. "Relax, Dad," I said with a polite smile. "I wouldn't dream of embarrassing you." The evening unfolded like a perfectly rehearsed play. Emma was radiant, charming, and visibly exhausted by her own perfection. I noticed the tiny cracks, the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the forced laughter when Thomas whispered in her ear. During dinner, my father and Mr. Harrison slipped easily into business talk. "The merger will save Anderson Industries," Harrison said with a grin. "You're lucky your daughter's so cooperative." My fork froze midway to my plate. They weren't celebrating love. They were negotiating a transaction. Emma was just another clause in their contract. Later that night, I found her alone in the kitchen, pretending to help tidy up. "You look different, Liv," she said softly. "Happier." "I am," I replied. "You could be too, you know. You don't have to marry him." Her fingers twisted around her ring. "It's not that simple. Dad needs this merger." "And what do you need?" asked gently. Her eyes flashed. "I need to not disappoint them like you did." Then, almost instantly, she winced. "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," I said. "But you're wrong. I didn't disappoint them. I disappointed their expectations. That's not the same thing." The next morning, I met with Mr. Harrison again, at his invitation this time. He still didn't know who I really was. "Miss Reynolds," he began smoothly, "we've been considering acquiring your companies. They'd be an excellent addition to our portfolio." I sipped my coffee calm. "Interesting," I said. "I hear you're already merging with Anderson Industries." He smirked. "That relic. We'll dismantle it after the wedding. Henry Anderson doesn't realize it yet, but his company will be gone within 6 months. That's why this marriage is essential." My hand tightened around the cup. "And Emma? Does she know?" He laughed. "She's just happy to marry into money. Women like her are manageable." I rose slowly from my chair. "Then allow me to properly introduce myself. I'm Olivia Anderson, Emma's sister." And I think this conversation just took a turn. The smugness drained from his face as I pressed play on my phone, the recording of every arrogant word he'd just said. "Now," I told him, "let's discuss how this merger actually ends." By noon, the story had spread. The merger was dead, and both families were scrambling to contain the fallout. I found Emma in the garden, her face pale and tear-streaked. "What did you do?" she whispered. I handed her my phone. "I told you the truth. Listen." She played the recording, her hands trembling. When it ended, she slipped off her ring and set it down beside a vase of perfect roses. "They'll be furious," she murmured. "Probably," I said with a faint smile. "But sometimes anger is the first step to freedom." That night, while chaos brewed in both households, I sat in my hotel room overlooking the city, and dialed a number that would change everything. My father. My father's company was collapsing, but it wasn't beyond rescue. Not if the right ally stepped in. And this time that ally was going to be me. It was finally time to show my family who I had become. The morning that should have been Emma's wedding dawned crisp and clear. Instead of church bells and champagne, both families were in full-blown panic. I found my father in his study, hunched over his desk. He looked smaller somehow, tired, defeated. "It's over," he murmured without lifting his head. "The company's finished. Everything I built gone." "Not quite," I said, sliding a folder in front of him. "There's another option." He hesitated before opening it. As his eyes scanned the pages, confusion replaced despair. "Reynolds Tech wants to partner with us," he said, blinking. "But why would Olivia Reynolds?" "Because I'm Olivia Reynolds," I said quietly. "I changed my name years ago. I didn't want your money or your influence. I needed to prove I could stand on my own." He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time in years. "You're the CEO of Reynolds Tech." He nodded. "Actually, of 3 companies. And I'm offering a partnership. Not a takeover. I can help you rebuild Anderson Industries. We'll modernize, restructure, and grow stronger together." His voice trembled. "After everything, why would you do this?" "Because we're still family," I said softly. "And because success doesn't mean stepping on others. It means lifting them up." Later, I found Emma in the garden, sitting on a bench as workers dismantled what was left of her almost wedding. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice small. "About your companies?" "Yes," I said. "And I built them by following my own path, not theirs." She gave a shaky laugh that turned into tears. "I've spent so long trying not to disappoint them, I forgot who I was." I squeezed her hand. "You can start over. It's not too late." My mother was the last one to come around. She found me in the kitchen, the same place she'd once ordered me to help with the staff. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked quietly. "Would it have mattered?" I replied. "You wouldn't have seen me. Just another act of rebellion." Her eyes filled with regret. "We were wrong, Olivia. About so many things." The partnership between Reynolds Tech and Anderson Industries was announced a week later. When the media discovered that Olivia Reynolds was actually Olivia Anderson, the story went viral. It didn't hurt my reputation. It made it legendary. Emma moved to New York soon after. Therapy, travel, and time helped her rediscover herself. She eventually went back to school, earning a degree in environmental law, something that made her light up in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. Our parents struggled to adapt to change at first, but watching both their daughters thrive forced them to confront the truth. The world they tried to control was gone, and maybe that was a good thing. A year later we gathered again. This time not for a wedding, but for the grand opening of the Anderson Reynolds Innovation Center. Cameras flashed as I cut the ribbon. When I met my father's eyes across the crowd, he gave a small nod, the kind of nod that said everything words couldn't. "I'm proud of you," he told me later. "Not because of what you built, but because you had the courage to be yourself." My mother, standing beside him, added softly, "We should have seen it sooner." That night I stood in my old bedroom, now just a guest room, gazing out at the garden that once symbolized everything I wanted to escape. Emma joined me, barefoot, a glass of champagne in her hand. "You know," she said, smiling, "they thought making you help with my wedding would humiliate you. Turns out, it gave you the perfect chance to save us all." I laughed. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is just becoming the person they never believed you could be. Now our family dinners are different. No talk of mergers or arranged marriages. Just conversations about ideas, passion, and purpose. My parents are learning, slowly but surely, that true success isn't measured in wealth or titles, but in honesty, courage, and love. As for me, I'm exactly where I was always meant to be. Leading, creating, and surrounded by people who finally see me for who I am. Sometimes I think back to that wedding invitation, the one that was supposed to remind me of my place. They had no idea they were setting the stage for my comeback. What they meant as humiliation became the beginning of everything that mattered. Because sometimes, the most beautiful endings begin with being told you don't belong.